Hello folks, this episode of The Legends is an update to a previous episode, so we won't be using our usual Fundy Atheist opponent as a foil on this one. I've made it my business to keep up with the infamous Pope Leo X fable quote, and various attempts to claim that it was historical. Of late I've run across 3 claims, generally used together, of documentation for this quote. The first one is alleged to have come from the work of Baronius, a Catholic historian who lived after the time of Leo. But there's a problem with this one we can notice right away. What Baronius wrote here was a history of the Church, intended to cover the period from the very early Church. Unfortunately, Baronius died before he could finish his work, and his work ended with the year 1198. That's a few hundred years before the time of Leo X. Now someone might say, okay, he may have mentioned the quote offhand anyway as a sort of illustration. Well, if you want to say that, then you need to tell us where it is. I've provided a link to an online version of Tome 14 of that history. Maybe one of you Fundy Atheists can tell me where it is in there. Now what about this second reference? Well, that's a little harder to validate. There's no work with quite that title. The closest title is this one, but there's no 1842 edition. That title in English is 16 Books of Letters Written in the Name of Pope Leo X, dedicated to Pope Paul III, which would have been written by the author, Pietro Bembo, as Latin secretary for the Pope. At any rate, there's a link in the vid description for that one too, so you Fundy Atheists can tell me where to find the quote. How about that last one? Well, that's a real work, and it so happens a friend of mine, Roger Pierce, has a copy on his own website. Once again, I'll provide a link in the vid description. I wrote Pierce a note and he says no, the quote isn't in there. Maybe one of you Fundy Atheists can locate it. So there's the update, and as a bonus, I have a pretty good idea where all this nonsense comes from. It seems to originate with an article in this magazine called Nexus, which is into stuff like UFOs and conspiracy theories. There was an article written for it by this character, Tony Bushby, which was titled The Criminal History of the Papacy. As it happens, Bushby uses the Leo quote on the cover of one of his books, which is also known for, among other things, making up facts out of thin air. So there's an update. Be on the lookout for these citations being used. And when you do see them, see if the Fundy Atheists using them can explain themselves, and why the quote seems to be missing from these copies we have. Until next time, this is J.P. Holding.
Oh, come on, that's easy. All the editors at Google Books are working for the Vatican. Don't you know anything?
Until next time, see ya.